Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
And this is Outside My Window. Nova Scotia is famous for a lot of things, particularly its beaches and coastal areas enjoyed by both locals and tourists. But a visit to any one of these areas can often find garbage strewn about. You know, it only takes a minute to clean up, but a lot of people don't seem to care. Scotian Shores Ocean Warriors and its army of dedicated volunteers have made it their mission to clean up tons of garbage and marine debris so we can all enjoy our coastal areas. We're joined by two of those volunteers, Kristen Nicole and Angela Riley. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Very good to have you here. So I want to ask each of you, first of all, what led you to join this organization? Because the work is very, very hard and challenging. We'll get into that in a bit. So why did you join Scotia Shores Ocean Warriors?
I actually started it. So I started in August 2020 with the Scotian Shores movement of cleaning up beaches. It was mid-pandemic. I had just had my second child, and I started worrying about the state of the oceans. I grew up in a fishing family, and I'm a true Nova Scotian, have grown up by the ocean. So it's just something that we are all very near and dear to, is the ocean. And I needed to show my kids that we could do something and make a difference. So it started with my family and I, and over 3 years has grown to thousands of Nova Scotians who have cleaned almost 1 million pounds of garbage, which is insane.
That's amazing. It's disturbing, but amazing. Kristen, what led you to join this great group?
I had attended a cleanup before I'd even met Angel in person, but it wasn't until she put kind of an all call out like, hey, who can do spreadsheet stuff, that I got more heavily involved. I'm like, ooh, spreadsheets, numbers? Okay, count me in. And that kind of led me down into this lovely little rabbit hole where not only can I get out and do some things and, get out into the fresh air for once, I also get to see a difference that I've made. Because I can actually go, okay, I collected these 2 bags of garbage. So I like being able to have something after the fact. And it just kind of spiraled from there, I guess.
So how are the cleanups in individual communities organized? Is that done by local folks like yourselves? You give someone a call and say, hey, let's get a bunch together. Is that how that works?
It depends. So when it started, it was just kind of me organizing them. But now where we've grown so much, we actually have 6 other team leaders across the province. And we've got them situated in the Bay of Fundy, Digby, Yarmouth, and Shelburne areas, because those are the areas we find collects the most because of the Gulf of Maine and currents in Bay of Fundy. Their job that they're contracted for is to host one cleanup a month or to go join on one that someone else has organized. So they're kind of the main organizers, and then the rest of us team leaders just try to support each other in our different areas.
One might think that cleaning up garbage along a shoreline or a beach is a simple task. It's not. I've seen pictures and I've seen videos. It's also dangerous too. You don't know what you're going to come across. So are you given some training? And what about, implements? Are you given gloves and bags, that kind of thing? Or is that supplied by the volunteers? How does that work?
It was a lot of on-the-job training, to be honest. We knew some things like don't touch it, but knowing how to handle certain things and how to figure out the best strategy to move something that's stuck definitely is something that you have to know how to do it, or you have to witness somebody, because otherwise you just kind of look at the problem and you're not really seeing the bigger picture. I know I've seen you remove things in the past, and I'm like, I don't know how you did that, because you versus the thing you just removed does not make sense, but you use leverage, you use the tools that you have available. Similarly, there's certain things that, if you dig it out in a certain way and you use leverage and you use we have really good cutters that we use as well.
Yeah, so we do provide gloves and safety equipment. We try to, PPE as we all like to call it. But I find we use a lot of older methods because we don't sometimes machinery isn't the way. So old farm jacks work great for lifting big old tires. Or maybe it's 5 people on a large item instead of just one person trying to rip it out. But as we go through, and that's where sometimes bringing the fishers in and local older people, they're like, why don't you try this? And then it is a lot of learning as we go. So I always have learned that 2 heads are better than 1. So we kind of take our ideas, but we've learned a lot as we've went on and said, well, what works the best here? And sometimes good old woman and manpower is the way to go.
There's a lot of marine garbage, ghost gear out there, but there's also, I call it people garbage. People go to the beach and they just throw their trash. You see it all the time. You know, to what extent are you seeing and other volunteers when you go out to these beaches? I mean, how bad is it? And what type of garbage are you finding? Are there, food containers, or are they, what about illegal dumping? What are some of the stranger things you've seen?
Well, I'll answer because I do Nova Scotia wide. It really depends on what beach you're at. So if you're in Halifax, you're going to find single-use plastics, tampon applicators, which we like to call beach whistles. Haha, funny. And all that plasticky stuff. Yeah, you can laugh. I got a better one for you later. But if we go somewhere like in the Bay of Fundy, it's upwards 80 to 90% fishing debris just because that's the activity that's going on down there. I do find in the summertime, as the humans start using the beaches more, we do find more human garbage instead of like marine-based garbage. There is a data point that says 80% of all the garbage we see in the ocean is land-based, but by what we see in the Bay of Fundy and Yarmouth and Digby, no. It is ocean-based industry garbage, shipping, fishing, stuff like that. So yeah, we do find some single-use plastics, but a majority of what we find is rope and lobster bands, plastic strapping from boxes of bait, buoys, polystyrene is everywhere. Styrofoam is the worst. So yes, fireworks for those lovely people that like to set those off. They like to leave those on the beach a lot. But yeah, I think like Pembroke Beach, which is in Yarmouth, yeah, there's some stuff, but it's mostly lobster bands. It's just every beach you go to, if we go clean it up, then the next tide's going to be full of those bands.
Down this way for like people garbage, we'll see water bottles, Gatorade bottles, and like condiment bottles are the common ones we find for some reason. Beyond that, it's mostly like marine, like industry based. It's not, we don't see a lot of like Thames cups or anything like that on a lot of the shorelines I go to.
Yeah, so when I first started this, I actually argued with the Great Nova Scotia Pick Me Up because they kept on putting out this data thing. The top 5 items you're going to find when you do a cleanup, and it was all land-based because it was cigarette butts, Tim Hortons cups, stuff that you'd find on land. And I said, no. I said, that's not what I'm seeing. Because when I'm on the shoreline, it's very different. So now they actually have 2 sets of data, which is what are you going to find on the land-based? So if I stay in a parking lot, yeah, it's going to be cigarette butts. Versus what are you going to find in the beach? And if it's anywhere other than Halifax, because there's so many people, or Sydney, Nova Scotia, because there's so many people, or Yarmouth Harbor right in it because there's so many people, it is a lot of fishing debris, sadly. And I hate to say it because guess who goes fishing? This lady talking right now. So I hate to see it on the beaches.
Now, Kristen, you mentioned that you were the spreadsheet person, and I personally am a big data guy, and that's my day job as well. But from your data that you've collected over the last 3 years, what are you seeing for trends?
I mean,
Are there any?
Yes, there definitely are. There's been certain areas where we've revisited many times. We had been speaking earlier about Pembroke, how we've gone back there quite a few times. I've lost count of how many thousands of pounds we've removed from that stretch of shoreline alone. It's not because people are necessarily going and dumping things on that shoreline. It just happens to be kind of a catch-all point. I think last year was something like 20-some thousand pounds, give or take, for that area alone. We had a cleanup back in November, Remembrance Day. We were at 4,600, I believe it was, for that day that we were there. But the amount of like stuff that had been there for quite some time was substantial. And then also Angela had mentioned, like, depending on where you're looking, you're going to see different things. So for me, I get a little sad at times if my cleanups down here are lower than 1,000 pounds. But that's just me, because I'm used to having nice big things that we pick up. Whereas for those, like my coworkers who work down in the Bay of Fundy, they often have smaller totals, but they have a lot of stuff because it's all the smaller plastics and those little things that would personally drive me nuts to pick up. But definitely kudos on them, because that's like kind of their bread and butter down here. Whereas I can walk a shoreline, and if I had the tools and the stuff, we could pull traps all day and rope balls all day. But it's very different depending on where we're looking.
Now, you also mentioned before we went on tape that there's a diversion element to your garbage that you're picking up. I'm going to call it garbage because it's not if you're repurposing it. So do you have a sense mathematically, like what kind of percentage of what you're picking up you're able to divert into artisan?
So I can speak on that because if we had proper funding and we had a work yard, like some other groups out there, you can now in Nova Scotia recycle upwards of 75% of what you're pulling out of the ocean if we were support it in the right ways, because you can now recycle rope, you can recycle traps, you can recycle plastic bait box strapping. Sustain Technologies has started recycling marine plastics this year, which is huge. We have 2 other rope recyclers in Nova Scotia now. All the metal can be recycled. So if we had it all built up, the infrastructure, then yes. And it is starting. Yarmouth is actually one of the best places because your guys' waste park here takes rope and traps and nets and all that stuff from us. They waive the tipping fees because they know we're out there pulling it from the shoreline, and they say, we're not going to charge you for this. Bring it in and we'll recycle it. But for us to take a load of marine plastics to Sustain, that's a whole day trip and it costs a lot of money. So we have to sometimes figure out. But I know a different group that I worked with this year has been up. We've got more funding with that group, and it's been upwards of 75% recycling rate, which is huge. Like, that's really good. With us at Scotian Shores, it's not that high because we're just starting to get work yards. We're starting to get the infrastructure kind of set up because we work a lot with volunteers, and with we strive ourselves on not using a lot of money and not having to have a lot of funding. Like, it'd be great to have the funding, but we're going to keep doing this without it because it is power to the people, kind of our movement. That individual can make a difference. But yeah, if we had more money, it'd be great.
So we'll come back to the funding argument or discussion point in a minute. But so what sort of things are you making out of what you're diverting?
So a variety of things. We have rope mats, rope baskets. There's kind of rope pitcher frames. Pardon? The bowls. Yeah, bowls and monkey's fists they're called. So they're balls, rope balls. I make jewelry out of the sea glass, which I hate to call garbage, but guess what? It is. And then
I see a lot of people posting about picking up glass.
people love sea glass in Nova Scotia. So we repurpose what we can. Most recently, there is a plastic recycler local to Yarmouth. He's in East Kentville. So he's been taking stuff like lobster trap tags and plastic bottle caps and shotgun shells. He's been making things like coasters and little pots and stuff. So we're starting to see like ocean plastic direct into a product. So yeah, it's been neat. We call them East Coasters. Yeah, it works, right? Garbage
It
plastic.
does work.
Yes. So there is a bunch of things you can make in it. And then we have a lot of artists that will request, hey, have you found a net lately? Why, yes, we have, come and get it. Or the big giant tire that we got that was 600 pounds
saw that.
went to Nova Scotia's Strongest Man. So we find ways, but not everything. I wish we had a way to repurpose everything, but yeah.
Do you have a marketplace that you'll sell those things on, or do the individual artisans kind of take over once they get the raw materials to work with?
Both.
Okay.
So we do markets ourselves. I do sell online some. When we go to cleanups, often we'll have a bit of stuff with us, but we also have artists that just get material from us and go make their own stuff. For us, as long as it's being repurposed, then that's what really matters. So, and I am a big fan of any ocean debris art because it starts that conversation. So it's a yes, take this because you're going to make other people talk about this. So
What kind of reaction do you get from people in the communities when you go in? Do they come over and say, "Wow, thanks so much"? Do you and what kind of feedback do you get from the fishing community, from fishermen?
I mean, it varies. Oftentimes, they're very happy that we're there. If you look hard enough, you're going to find someone who's cranky about anything everywhere. There's always going to be a naysayer somewhere. So we don't really take that to heart. However, more often than not, there are people like driving by going, "Oh, what are you doing?" We've had people drive by a cleanup and they could be tourists in Nova Scotia and they're like, "Oh, can we help?" So we've had people from the States over, like from Europe, join our cleanups when they've been local. And then we've had, whole families come out for certain cleanups as well. We'd love to see more locals as well, like always. The more people, the more we can get done. Many hands make light work, but generally the reaction is pretty favorable. The only thing I think people have sometimes said is, "Man, I wish I would have known about it beforehand." But so getting it out there sometimes can be a little difficult, even though we try really hard.
Well, where can they find you? Let's take that opportunity right now.
we're on almost all the social medias. So Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, website. We do an email alert list. So if you send us an email at scotianshores@gmail.com, then you can be added to the cleanup alert email list, which kind of gives you a week notice of, hey, we're doing a cleanup here. It's family friendly. Wear your boots. We're going to give you food, that sort of stuff. So there's that. And then a lot of word of mouth. We try to do that. And we have a lot of regulars that come to our cleanups.
And your marketplace is located off your website as well?
Yeah, we do the website, but I do different markets around Nova Scotia. So the summer wasn't as markety as it should have been because I was too busy cleaning up garbage. But usually I'm in Dartmouth every Saturday at Alderney Market, and I do the Lunenburg Market the first Thursday of each month. I've done markets in Yarmouth before, actually in this room that we're in. And different things like that. So, and sometimes people just message us and request, can you bring this with you?
Good and bad habits are learned. Kristen, you're a teacher. Education is a huge component of trying to get people to understand why you shouldn't litter. I don't know why we're still having this conversation. Look at all the work that, for instance, Waste Check has done on the education front. And there's still people that, don't know how to separate properly. But when you go out there on these cleanups, these massive cleanups, do you ever take a message back to your students and say, look at these pictures and
All the time. I'll go back, guess what I did this weekend? And they're like, "Ugh, Madame, did you go clean up somewhere?" I'm like, "Yes, I did." And then sometimes I'll throw them a picture. Like I had a really, really large rope ball from the Mother's Day cleanup. It was over 300 and some pounds. So I threw it up on the board. And I'm like, just for fun, let's do some math with this. Your best guess. How much was this rope ball in weight? And whoever's closest, I'll bring them a prize, and they like that. And then I also helped and ran the school-wide Earth Day cleanup. So I brought my good scale, and they got really excited seeing the number go up and up and up. So that was a really big motivating factor for them. So I'm working on them.
And you're hoping, obviously, that they bring that message home with them.
Yeah, I've had a success at getting a couple out to cleanups. If we've been down in the Pubnico, Argyle area, I'd like to see more, but I understand there's sports, there's different activities and things, so it doesn't always work, but I haven't given up hope yet.
So tell us about one of the biggest cleanups that you folks have had so far. Just reading here off the Scotian Shores Ocean Warriors Facebook page, the largest volunteer-led ghost gear cleanup in Nova Scotia history just happened last week or a couple of weeks ago. Not sure when this is going to air. 75 people and organizations, and tell us about that. How much was cleaned up, and why did you folks want to focus on this particular area?
So it's actually the second year we've cleaned the Cape or the Cape Island or the Cape Light or the Cape Ledge or whatever you want to call these particular island, because wherever you're from is what you call it. So I actually had a fisher bring me to that island 2 years ago, and he said, Angela, you're not going to like this. And I said, oh, okay, well, let's go. Ooh, a tropical paradise. And then I walked over the berm, and it was horrifying. I call it the lobster trap graveyard. So last year it was like our first kind of bigger project to work with the fishers. We need them to bring us over in boats, and you can't navigate the area unless you know the area. So last year we removed about 1,200 traps from that island and 75,000 pounds on different weekends. So this year we were like, we're going to go back and finish this. We didn't finish it. There's still lots on the island, but we were able to stay there for a whole week. One of the people that own a cabin on that island said, yeah, you use the cabin. The Coastal Restoration Society, who's down here this summer doing some work, they agreed to bring their helicopter and lift stuff off the island. So that's why we've got bags waiting on the island right now, ready for helicopter lifts, and hopefully early September. We're just hoping the hurricanes stay away. But yeah, it's kind of been, I don't know. It's Wade, the fisher that brought me there. He was the first one to take me fishing. He was the first one to say, you know what, I know you're not out there trying to make us look bad. You're out there actually trying to help the fishery, because that's really what we're doing. That's what Nova Scotia roads are built on, is the fishery. So I guess it became kind of the dream project of, if we can do this, we can do anything. And then it became a stubborn thing, because there was a lot of people that said, oh, you'll never do it. You'll never clean up around the lighthouse.
Oh, never tell me the odds.
Oh, don't tell me no. So we did clean up around the lighthouse this year. We're just waiting for the helicopter to come. So it's been a lot of just kind of proving people that it can be done, proving that fishers and shoreline cleaners can work together. And just, it's in the lobster capital of the world. There's a lot of reasons why we picked this. And it also, for me personally, has the largest and tallest lighthouse in Nova Scotia. And I love lighthouses and baby sheep. So there's lots of reasons to go clean this island. It's a really big birding area. So, and it's close enough to land that we could still go even if the weather was a little bad. But we have a lot of support down there from the local fishers. So this year we had upwards of 10 of them out there helping us. Some of them couldn't lift things, but they were out there tying the traps together because they know knots, right? So there's a lot of that. So I think it's partially because we get so much support there, and stubbornness, which has also been learned from my grandfather, who was a fisherman.
And that's the thing. I think, both Gary and I have driven this point home in talking with many organizations over the last couple of years for the podcast, and that everybody has something to give when it comes to being a volunteer. You don't necessarily have to be, Nova Scotia strongman out there tossing tires, even if it is just time, even if it is just spreadsheets. There's something that everybody can contribute when it comes to helping out like this, even if you're just driving a four-wheeler.
Yep, exactly. We love the four-wheelers.
You haven't got to lift anything. You just got to drive, right?
When we hear the four-wheelers coming in the far, it's like hallelujah bells. We're like, oh, someone's coming with a four-wheeler.
Well,
because I was going to ask you, like, how do you get the stuff out, right?
Sometimes it's pure stubbornness. We've definitely flipped a 200-pound tire up a hill a couple times.
Oh, me and one guy got a 600-pound tire. I don't know how it happened. I don't know how we didn't die, but it happened. But yeah, no, sometimes it just happens. Like that last retrieval we just did, we just had unprecedented weather. You don't get more than 2 days without fog on that island ever. We had 4 days of beautiful weather, not a drop in the sky. It was slicker on the ocean. Like even the fishers were like, what's going on here? And I'm like, Mother Earth approves.
Yes.
Yeah. So we do have our own four-wheeler, but we are very picky and choosy of where we use it, because like I said, sometimes machines aren't the way to go, because you're going to rip up the environment more than if you can just get 5 to 10 people out there to do some hard work. So we're a little different that way, but we do like machines.
Like this past week with the volunteers, you were saying about there's different ways to volunteer, where we did have people working all day with us. One of the things we did do was provide lunch if you were working for the full day. So we did have a couple women that kind of said to us, like, I don't want to go clean, but I will happily cook you guys lunch, or provide, like, you give me the ingredients, you will have lunch. And that was a big relief for us, because it wasn't necessarily, me running to go get Subway or something. It was like home cooked, like made with love, all that flour.
It always
stuff.
tastes better out in the field too, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's like camping, right? I mean, you could cook goulash home and
we had
cook
one-
it out in the woods. It's always better in the
We
woods.
can't like right on the island cooking because
Nice.
the cabin there, Wanda Atkinson, she's one of the Friends of the Light out there. Like she come and cooked a big old meal. She's gourmet cook. I had no idea. We were eating like kings.
But you need that energy.
We did. I've never eaten so much. It's a lot that week. It was a lot. 6 days straight. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
I feel like I finally recovered. It took a few days.
Just in time for the next one.
Just in time for back to school.
Yes. Because that will take a bit out of you, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I go back Friday. So yeah.
So how far ahead do you plan your agenda or your cleanups?
It depends. So in the summertime, spring, summer, we can plan ahead of time. And that's when we do our big retrievals like the Cape or like Earth Day that's down here. But in the wintertime, I say we turn to reactive, because in the Bay of Fundy, we can have 2 tons of garbage just go boom on one shoreline that we just cleaned. 2 tons of garbage just right up on shore. So we're there for the next week. Boom, 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 boom. We really have to follow where the garbage goes. And luckily we have so many people down in the Bay of Fundy that they call us and they say, it's washed ashore. And we're like, let's go, like, so it's hard sometimes to get the government and stuff to understand, because they want to know ahead of time. And I'm like, guys, I don't know where it's going to wash ashore. So there's apparently a garbage patch out in the Bay of Fundy that comes ashore in the wintertime. So we've seen it.
Winter is garbage season in the Bay of Fundy.
That's the first I've ever heard of that.
It's horrible. About 2
I've
weeks.
heard about the Pacific one, like the plastic.
Yeah, well, there's actually 5 of them. There's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. There's actually 2 Atlantic garbage patches. One in the Indian Ocean garbage patch. You don't hear about them very often. But in the Bay of Fundy, the fishers actually call it the Cedar Swamp. And they will not take me out there because they do not want me to see it. Apparently, it is a kilometer or 2 of a seaweed patch that just gathers garbage all summer, spring, fall, and then the winter storm comes in and pushes it up, and that's what we see. I have a science on that? No, they won't take me to see it. They said it'll break my heart. Like, I'm like, but I want to see it so we can go clean it up. But yeah, we see it when it washes ashore.
There's no way to deal with something like that at sea?
Don't know yet. So I hear that there is a retrieval group that's working out Harborville way. Maybe they'll go there. I'm hoping. I'm like, hey, guess what? But yeah, it's around Isle Haute or Ile Haute or however you want to pronounce it. I don't know how. It's sitting out there, I guess, but nobody will take me to go see it. So I wait for it to wash ashore in the wintertime and chase it around. But yeah, it's pretty scary when you go to Harborville and you literally see waves rolling garbage. That is how bad it is there. It's clean there now. So all the Bay of Fundy people come down and help us because they're like, we have no garbage. It's really weird.
Careful
to
what
see.
you wish for, right?
Well, that's what I said. 2 weeks into November, beginning of December, and it's just like throw up. And it lines up with a few things. So it's sad, but there's that's when the fishing opens up there a lot. So I think what happens is the propellers and some of the scallop dragging and then main fishery stuff, everything just starts getting sucked up in there. And we think that the tides and currents change a little bit, which is why that patch starts coming ashore too. So we still haven't figured it out.
Is there a hope between the two of you that at some point you work yourself out of a job doing this?
I mean, that's the dream.
yeah.
Dream.
I mean, I'd love to see, one, we wouldn't have to do this anymore. But if we still had to continue doing it in some way, shape, or form, like, I'd love to see it get to the point where we could have, like, summer students working, like, with that because, they're young, they're able, and I like doing it, but, I'm decrepit now and, will hurt myself walking. I did that last year on the Cape.
Getting old sucks.
Yeah, I did that last year on the Cape. I was walking and rolled my ankle and was down for the count
Yep.
on flat ground.
I've got a few years on you, trust me.
So,
It's
yeah.
not much more to look forward to.
It's downhill from here on out, I hear. But definitely, the goal would be for our totals to go down. So they're still going up, but I know we're accessing places we've never accessed before. We're getting more connections. We're finding more people willing to help us. I'm known by name at the dump, which I don't know if that's a good thing. But they look at me and they're like, where were you now? And I'm like, hi. So, it's good and it's bad. And
Yeah, I will say with what I saw, so that Coastal Restoration Society did contact us this year because they're from British Columbia and they wanted to know where the garbage was. So they took me for a helicopter ride so I could show them. I thought the Cape was bad for traps, and we've taken off over 2,500 traps. It's not bad. So every outlying island in southwest Nova Scotia, almost every single one is a wall of traps. Otter Island, the Cape is still covered, Blanche, Eel Bay, McNutt's Island is a wall of traps. We have decades of work, and I mean, it is what it is. But it has been building up for about 40 years. So I want to be worked out of a job, but that is an amusing thought to me.
it's pretty far off, it feels, at this point in time.
So let's go back to funding,
Okay.
because I think that this will be a bit contentious issue in and of itself. And I mean, certainly you'd love to be able to get more funding. Everybody would love to have more funding. We all know that the environment, pardon the pun, of where it is right now, it's unlikely that you'll be able to, get more out of the different levels of government. But where does your funding come from, and how can people help?
So we have a variety of ways that we get funding. Scotian Shores is registered as a business. So with that, we use some of the debris that we find and we sell it at markets. So if we don't get grants, we will always have a way to make our own money. So we are not like a not-for-profit that can only do work when they get grants. We're going to keep on going. But we also have been very lucky in the last few years that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Ghost Gear Fund, we got money off of that last year, and this year we're working off the Fiona Fund. So it's basically the same thing, but they gave us twice as much funding as they did last year, so we're doing something right. But then we also, the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture in Nova Scotia has also recognized us as one of the champions for their marine debris program. So they gave us about $10,000 this year to help with some of the administration costs of that, to make sure we're out there working with the fisheries. But then we also have some fishing unions and different fishermen and different people who are just like, hey, we want to help you. So we do get some sponsorships, like for Earth Day, we go sponsorships. And some people like Vernon Dion's, he gives us wholesale pricing on gear that we use a lot of. So every bit counts. And then there's also in-kind donations. So the Yarmouth Waste Park does not charge us for tipping. Different seafood facilities might lend us their pot trailer. So instead of us going and spending $10,000 on a trailer, we now just get to borrow theirs. The fishers who work with us, hey, use this boat, so we don't have to spend $100,000 on a boat, and then other organizations like Coastal Restoration Society, who's coming in and saying you can use our helicopter, which is $1,000 an hour. We don't have that kind of funding, but we take all and any help. So yeah, there's lots of different ways. We don't do a ton of fundraising stuff. I haven't gotten into that just because we focus on action as much as we can. So as soon as we have funding, we're out there cleaning constantly, and try to clean more than what we're expected to do with our funding. So with the Fisheries and Oceans, we're supposed to do 15 cleanups a year. We've already got thousands registered. So we're just going to keep going. Thank you for the funding. We're going to stretch it as much as we can. So that's, yeah. So if people want to help, they can donate money. They can come buy one of the things that we sell. But I always say money is nice, but the best way you can help is by coming out and sacrificing your body for us. No, we like volunteers, whether that be cooking or, helping sign people in or dragging 600-pound tires.
There's definitely a role for everybody, and
role
we
for
can
everyone.
find something. Like, I'm often doing like admin at the table, but if someone else who wasn't necessarily able to go to the shoreline was trained to do that, I would be out frolicking, as I tend to call it. Maybe not picking up heavy things, because I tend to get like lasered in on something like trap tags and just like end up in a squirrely tangent off. But yeah,
Going in a circle.
yeah, it happens some days. But there's always stuff that can happen, and like certain companies have been really good about dumpsters as well.
Dumpsters, Rolex.
Rolex.
I should give them a shout out.
They're
Rolex.
fantastic.
Sorry.
We love them.
In Yarmouth, we like them. They give us free dumpsters. So they bring it to wherever we want them to, drop it off, bring it to the dump for us, no fee.
Nice.
And they're super nice too about it. And
Yeah,
tell
Well,
us
and,
good
and
job.
this is, right in line with the support local kind of affair. Vernon Dion's always been really great in the community. Rolex is an unsung hero of sorts behind the scenes. They don't usually get much of a shout out, so we'll give it to them today for sure. And I'm sure there are lots of others that have contributed in as you go along. But I mean, that's the thing, is that everybody has a little something that they can contribute to make this a success, and it's not going to be done by one or two people.
No, you're one of them now. You're helping us get the word out. And I always say that to the media folk. It's like a lot of them are, I wish I could help you clean up, but I have to hold this camera. And I'm like, no. Hold the camera. I'm like, please, because do you know how hard it is for me to try to pick up garbage and take pictures and then do a story? So I love it when people come out with camera, and I tell no, but often the camera people will take pictures for an hour and be like, I can't do this anymore. I got to clean. And I'm like, okay, fine. But take your camera back out. So yeah, thank you for getting us in here and doing this, because it does help get the word out. And like a lot of this is word of mouth and kind of that local run grassroots. This is a grassroots project, really, if you think about it. So it's thank you.
You're very welcome.
Pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask you both anyway. Do you ever get discouraged when you're out there and see that vast amount of, as you said, Angela, just rolling in with the waves nonstop? What's it like? What goes through your minds when you get back home after a cleanup?
It depends. So for me, I often get out cleaning by myself or with just one other person, because as I said, I often do like the administrative side of tasks when we're doing the bigger cleanups. So if I'm out cleaning and it's the point where I'm like overwhelmed because of how much there is. So instead of getting focused on what I can't do, what I tend to do is go, all right, today I'm hunting for lobster bands and lobster trap tags, or I'm just going for rope, or I'm just looking for whatever, just because then I can be like, oh, I cleaned up all of this one thing, because then it feels like I've actually like accomplished something, instead of going, well, I got this bag, but look at all the other stuff I didn't get. So I find it honing in on something specific that I can go, okay, look at all this rope I got. It definitely helps, instead of going, man, I got the rope, but I didn't get the traps, and I didn't do this, and I didn't do that. You can always go back. There's always
It's
more.
not going anywhere, unfortunately.
Usually it's not. There have been times where it's been time sensitive, but I find that definitely zeroing in on something specific can help when you're feeling discouraged. And then maybe the next day you challenge yourself to something different.
There is one thing that makes me very discouraged, extremely, and it's those darn lobster bands. And the reason for that is because I know where most of them are coming from. And it's not the boats. It's the processing facilities who are dumping them out of their pipes because the Environment and Climate Change Canada won't do anything about it and won't fine anybody. And we know that a majority of these lobster bands, and I'm talking 10,000 per tide up in the Bay of Fundy, like my volunteers are just like, what do we do? We know where they're coming from and nobody will do anything. I've been fighting it for 2 years. I have videos of this stuff coming out of the pipes. I've gotten pipe socks put on these pipes and they won't maintain them. We've had people, like, there's some people in Yarmouth doing it right now. Thousands of these bands being flushed out of the pipes. And when you're up in the Bay of Fundy in the wintertime and you just cleaned a beach, and then 6 hours later you go to that beach and there's 10,000 lobster bands in less than a kilometer, that's heartbreaking. And to try to motivate a team of ladies and men to say, we can do this, and then when we know that it's legit being dumped out of facilities and nobody will do anything about it, That's the most disheartening thing
So
right
where
there.
does the responsibility for that kind of lie? Is it a municipal ordinance? Is it a
It's all over the
provincial,
place.
federal?
It's that's why it's been so hard. So I've heard Fisheries and Aquaculture Nova Scotia is working on something that's going to stop it from the inside of the plant. Has it happened yet? No. Environment and Climate Change, they do have a rule that says delirious substances shouldn't be released, but their way of following up, if it's reported, is a letter. If they get reported a second time, it's a letter. If they
Ooh,
get
a
reported
letter.
a third time, it's a letter.
Wow.
No education, nothing. It just keeps going. So we have been working ourselves with the plants. But I mean, for me to walk into a plant with a handful of their garbage and be like, you shouldn't be doing this. They just brush me off. Oh, frig off. Nobody's going to do anything about this. So we've gone to the media, like CBC has done stories. I've got TikTok videos that have 1 million views on them. Nothing. So I'm supposed to get another update in 2 weeks that tells me what they're going to do about this, but it's been 2 years and winter's fast approaching and my heart is like hanging up there and I'm like, please let there not be as many lobster bans this year. Please, please, please. Because it is devastating. You talk to anybody up in the Bay of Fundy that goes to their beaches down there and what the most common thing is, and they're going to say lobster bans. And yes, some of them are coming off the boat. I do know that, and I have fishers that argue with me, and I'm like, I know, I go banding. Like, we lose some, but for the amount that we see, they would literally need to be dumping them out by the bucket load. And I have any facility that I have visited, out of 10, at least 7 to 8 of them are doing this. Because I find the pipes, and I'm like, what is this? So yeah, that to me is the most disheartening thing. But then when we all work together and you see the big giant pile afterwards and people just keep on coming out and we get the returnees, it is uplifting again. It's always the back and forth feeling of like, oh, that's terrible that there's that much garbage, but look at what we just did, like woo woo. So yeah, lobster bans. I hate
Is there
them.
a repurposing opportunity with the bands?
You can make bouncy balls out of them.
Okay.
There is an artist called On Off Loom, Carly. She makes quilts to kind of,
Really?
they're not warm, but it's lobster band quilts, and it's to create that conversation.
Right.
I have seen
It's
little
more
girls.
art than a quilt.
Yeah, it's
I know
art.
what you're saying.
You can make skipping ropes with a piece of rope, and then you put the bands on them and you can skip on them. I've seen Christmas tree garland, but we haven't even found a way to recycle them yet.
Wow.
And a lot of people believe that they're biodegradable.
No.
And they're not. I'm like,
No,
they're not.
And we know for sure that like you can't reuse them. They're usually too degraded. They're not going to hold up against things. We've tried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had our.
So it's
Yeah.
been, I've even had fishers like take bands that we've collected to test. Can we reuse them? And I've tried and it's like bling, bling, bling. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, no, they're slippery now. So, and often when lobsters do go into a processing facility, they're actually rebanded.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's something I learned. The blue cold water ones, because they want to make sure that the bands that are on those lobsters stay on the lobsters properly, because if a lobster gets loose and starts squishing the other
Sure.
lobsters, then you can kill the whole pile of them, right? So, yeah, they used to use the little wooden plug things.
That's how Vernon Dion got going.
Well, he's got them I seen them the other day. I said, is that those things? And I asked him, I said, why you guys stop using those? Oh, animal cruelty. And I said, are you kidding me? Do you not realize that these lobsters get held in tanks for 6 to 8 months? Like, isn't that? But no. So people are trying to find alternatives to the band.
But I also hear that they're toxic. I mean, if people leave the bands on them when they go and cook them, that
Oh,
there's
yeah.
toxins that'll get. Oh, it's one of my biggest pet peeves watching Cooking Channel, anything, is when they cook the lobster and they leave the bands on. It's like, what are you doing? I'm yelling at the TV. My wife is going, why are you yelling at the TV? Because they're cooking a lobster with the bands on. I've seen Bobby Flay do it. I've seen, world-renowned chefs just toss them in the pot. And it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I didn't realize that this was
It's
as
bad.
big an issue.
If
Wow.
this time of year, it's not too bad. But like I said, even Pembroke Beach, it's horrible. Like There's so many lobster bans everywhere.
But there have been some facilities that have put the socks on that basically serve as like a catch-all at the end of the pipe.
Sure.
You just have to empty it.
Yeah, but they're not.
Yes, but that's, yes, you have
Not
to
funny.
empty.
There's the follow through.
Yes.
The maintaining it. I will say there is one Long Point lobster down in Cape Sable, Johnny. He totally netted his whole facility inside and out because he was like, I'm not being part of that, you know? And I was like, this is what we need. But there's a lot of facilities that are, it is horrendous what is coming out. It's not just bands, it's zip ties, it's marking tape that the square tags that they use for that you see on the gray bins.
Oh, okay.
Plastic, and this, I call it chloroplast. It's this white stuff that you make political signs out of. They use
Okay.
them in the lobster bins, and it's all this little tiny microplastics all coming out. It is something that needs to be dealt with because the seafood industry should not be poisoning its own waters. And that's kind of what these facilities are doing.
Seems like they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Well, and it's frustrating as well because through research, we've learned that like New Brunswick, they have regulations against this. So it's not an issue there, whereas we're right next door. Like, come on, let's just look and kind of steal what they're doing and make it work for us.
Folks can also help out Scotian Shores. Lots of information and videos and pictures on both the Facebook page and web page. There's a lot of really great merchandise as well. You got T-shirts. You each have Scotian Shores T-shirts on, and these are all repurposed, made from repurposed.
Most of the stuff
Most
is.
of it,
The
yeah.
swag isn't. I call it swag. So the T-shirts, baseball caps and stuff, they are locally made. I can say that. I do go local with anything, and I try to make it as natural as possible. So most of it's repurposed, but I can't say that everything is.
And if you're listening to this conversation, you're interested in either helping the group out financially, or you want to be a volunteer, that's a great thing. And families, I've seen pictures of families, little kids helping out, so that's just terrific. Angela, Kristen, thank you very much for coming in today, and thank you to you two and all the many volunteers with Scotian Shores. We appreciate what you do.
Thanks for having us.
I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this has been Outside My Window.